My guest today is Tom Ridge, and we got talking about things like having difficult conversations on teams, different team dynamics, and of course, everyone's favorite topic that is not hotly debated, agile software development. And I thought this was a really interesting conversation because I got to see how Tom was navigating some real big issues with projects falling behind schedule and things that they did to try and make up for this. Again, using data and trying to make decisions in an agile software development fashion. So I think that you're really going to enjoy this one. There's a lot of interesting takeaways. So sit back, enjoy, and I'll see you next time. I like it because I used to use Riverside, and I really liked Riverside, another streaming platform or like podcasting platform, I guess. But they were losing a lot of my data, so I would finish these podcasts, and then I would go to get the media, and I'm like, hey, like it's not there, and their support was like, oh, we see it on our side, and I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't help me. So I moved to StreamYard. Haven't really looked back since, but sometimes the UI is just a little finicky, but. That should be okay. Cool. Well, Tom, if you want to kick us off, I would love to hear about your career journey. And like I said before we started recording, as early or as late as you'd like to start, and just we can kind of walk through some of that and see what's going on.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Tom Ridge. I'm currently based in South Australia, and I've had a bit of an, I wouldn't say it's like super unusual career path into software engineering and engineering management by extension. But I fought, I think, for the longest time to kind of like that I actually was very interested in computers. I was like, no, it's just a hobby. And then I kind of came into it pretty late by my standards. I was about sort of 23 and got my first job as a Flash developer and animator. And I was horrible at animation, and I'm still terrible at animation. This was like way back when. And I could absolutely tell my boss at the time getting sort of somewhat frustrated with me. And I think they were probably a little bit relieved when I sort of had to wrap up my contract early to go move to the other side of the country.
Wow.
Which is a whole other story. But like I got hooked on software development. I got hooked on, at the time, one of my colleagues there introduced me to the Ruby programming language. So I got kind of brought into that ecosystem and culture, and that the Ruby community in Australia has always been really, really supportive and a really, really great place to be. So, but my now wife was at that time full-time in the Royal Australian Air Force. So it was kind of this opportunity to really go live across the other side of the country with her, and then kind of like really go like, are we doing this or not relationship wise? So that is all a pro of that was right around like the GFC, and so trying to get like a job as like an entry level kind of engineer, and sort of and for some reason thinking I was too old, I ended up kind of like getting into it via just building very basic like web applications for customers when we were living in Sydney. And then working, when we moved to Queensland, working as a support engineer for a Queensland Health e-learning kind of department, before like just going from more and more sort of programming and to finally sort of, getting what I'd always sort of wanted, like a Ruby job with a sort of client-based consultancy in Brisbane. More recently, I've just ticked over 8 years with them, so it's not that recent. But I got a job through the Ruby community at a company called Culture Amp, which is where I work now. We are a employee experience platform, so we manage everything from like engagement surveys to one-on-ones with your direct reports, to where I've been focused for the most of the last, let's say, 5 years on the performance side of our product. So things like manager reviews, feedback, calibration sessions, things like that. And when I came into there, I was still coming in as an engineer, but throughout that experience, and the job before, I'd sort of had a bit of a taste of team leadership, and then an opportunity came to run teams here at Culture Amp, and I did that for a good long while, up until about 2-3 years ago, where I sort of switched back to engineering. And my most recent manager stint, though, was actually over the last month and a half. I've sort of been back into the manager seat while still be doing the staff engineering bit. So it's kind of like back and forth on the engineering pendulum over the last 8 years or so.
That's awesome. And I have a whole, I guess, like a bunch of thoughts were coming to mind as you were walking through that. The first, and I think this is probably a really good thing for folks to hear, because when I talk with engineers or aspiring engineers, obviously right now, job market, very challenging, especially for new folks. And one thing that, if I understood correctly, you said the current company that you work for came up as an opportunity, I'm assuming through networking in the Ruby community.
Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about like how that came to be? Because sometimes, like, if I'm telling people, hey, yeah, you got to get your resume out there and apply to jobs, but also like network, and that can look so different for everyone. I feel like I don't have like a lot of great examples because I need to rely on other people that have like had success with that. So this is one of those opportunities.
Cool. So as it so happened, at one point in time, one of my bosses ran the Brisbane Ruby meetup. So I was in attendance pretty regularly there anyway, and was starting to give talks. And through there, I met a good friend, Rob. And Rob, who previously worked at CultureAmp, was on the Ruby Australia committee. And I've met a lot of people through that community generally, and just got to know them and become friends with them over the years. If you ever get the chance to go to like a Rails camp or a Ruby retreat, they're fantastic sort of unconference events. But Rob was always someone that did a really good job of just kind of like nudging me in the shoulder and telling me, you should do that, you should do that. So that's how I ended up giving my first conference talk. That's how I ended up jumping on the committee, because he was wrapping his time up and I ended up being on there. And there was a bit of a joke at the time. Sorry to digress a second, the Ruby Australia community is like responsible for organizing things like conferences to those unconferences to really predominantly sort of like helping communities and meetups kind of really, enable people to kind of like learn and develop with Ruby, and seeing that thrive in businesses and the like. So I had a bit of a stint on there, and the running joke at the time was that the treasurer at the time and folks would use it as a bit of a hiring and recruitment ground for CultureAmp. And so pretty much all of us that were on the committee at some stage eventually kind of found our way on there. So it was a great, like, even from the job before that, it was just like, gotten opportunities through that same sort of community, and just kind of by being willing to kind of go there and make friends and sort of talk with people and get to know them and just learn, or like take part in that community was really valuable. And to your point, it's the same advice I get to other, other folks more on the junior end of the spectrum. It's just that it's always a really, really good idea to get out there and to just meet real people and maybe share a meal or a conversation.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so thanks for kind of walking through that, because when I'm kind of nudging people in that direction, it's like, okay, there's hackathons, there's meetups, there's like anything where you can try to surround yourself with other people. It's one of those things that I realize as I say it to people, they're probably hearing it going, yeah, but like that's not going to guarantee me that I get a job. And I'm like, well, that's not really how networking works. Like that's something that you put time and effort into, and you have to be genuine. It's not, oh, I'm going to go to the meetup and just like I'm there to hand out my resumes and like sort of get the interview like right away. And it's like, no, like gotta invest time. It's about building those relationships, because it's not a guarantee, but if you're not taking the opportunity to actually network and build up the relationships, then those opportunities never have a chance to exist.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, it's a long-term game. I mean, the other side of things too is just half the reason I push folks in that direction. I was actually speaking to one of the people I was managing today about the same sort of thing, which is, hey, just if for no other reason than to get like a little bit of a diversity of opinion outside of what you might get in your own team or at the company, and start thinking about problem solving in different ways. It's like it is generally where you can get a lot of job opportunities, but you really just go there for the intent of being a part of that community and maybe making a few new friends and learning a few new things. And as long as you're engaged in that, you'll probably have a good time.
Yeah, and like excellent point, right? So my intention was not to say the only opportunity is for jobs, but yeah, like if you're going there, there's already going to be so many other things, like your ability to learn about things you haven't heard before, different perspectives, and then like it's almost like this the side effect of being around that kind of thing is potentially opportunities and networking. So again, yeah, thank you for walking through that. The other thing that you kind of touched on it a couple times, right? Like going from engineering into management and then back and then forth. I guess I'm curious in the beginning when you were taking those steps towards, like you said, like team lead kind of role and then into management. I'm curious, and I don't know the best way to ask this, but kind of like, did you see that as like a natural progression? Is that something where you're actively trying to chase it, or did it fall on your lap? Like, what did that look like for you to go from an IC into management?
That's a really great question. I've a little bit of both, like in terms of the falling into my lap and sort of seeing it as a natural progression. I had at the previous company that I worked at before Culture Amp, I tended towards taking like a natural ownership over increasingly larger sort of pieces of work, and when I'd sort of come to Culture Amp, part of the reason that I wanted to initially kind of focus on engineering was because that I saw a gaps in my skill set that I wanted to kind of remediate. But I also very much, I always have sort of enjoyed being a part of a team where I can help that team accomplish its goals, whatever that may be, but like also sort of work with other individuals and really sort of like help them achieve their goals. I think if you think looking back on now, one of my happy places is just like, when you can sort of see like, it doesn't matter if it's like people, orgs or whatever, you can see like potential there that just needs the right kind of structures and environment to really kind of grow and thrive. Like that's fun. That's fun to sort of see that come out. And then in terms of falling in the lap, our part of the organization was undergoing a restructure, and my team lead at the time kind of came to me and said, look, hey, there's this opportunity coming up for this small team. It wasn't necessarily like the most ambitious looking team on paper. It was designed to be like, we're going to be building up this new kind of structure similar to what Spotify's squads were at the time.
Okay.
And this team's remit is kind of small improvements across the product. You're going to be responsible for kind of training people into our part of the domain as a camp, which is what we called them. And you're going to, like help sort of prevent bugs and issues from getting to one of the teams. And that ended up being a really successful team on a number of fronts. So one was just because we were always had a really good relationship with our product manager in that team, still do. He's awesome. And our we also had a QA in our team who was between the three of us, we'd sort of naturally formed that sort of product leadership trio anyway, and worked really, really well to kind of not only kind of regularly kind of deliver value and improvements, but we trained everyone coming into the camp. We trained a number of sort of junior engineers up, and then we just started taking on increasingly bigger projects and delivering those on time as well. So it just sort of seemed like that was working quite well. And when you feel like you're, sort of hitting regular sort of product release milestones, you tend to feel pretty good about how the direction of things is going.
Right. Yeah. And that's really cool, right? Because you end up finding sort of this rhythm or this momentum where, like, obviously in software development, there's going to be things are changing all the time, right? But if you had a team that was constantly changing in terms of the people, right, then you're spending a lot of time, and can't remember, it's like storming, norming, forming, whatever if people are constantly changing, then it's like, okay, well, like, how do we actually, we have to spend time learning about how individuals, like how we work together, like what's effective for us, and then how we navigate whatever domain we're working in, like individuals might approach that differently. Like there's so many variables, but when you can start to keep things, like some parts of it consistent, and I find that, at least personally, when some of the team members at least are consistent in finding some patterns that work, I'm going to use the word process, but I don't necessarily mean like it must be super rigid, but you have some things that seem to work and you seem to stabilize on them, then you can do some things like, okay, well, we can move domains. And if you keep a lot of the other variables the same, you're like, hey, look, like we can still be effective. Or the domain stays the same, hard to speak. And then you onboard some new people. And then it's like, hey, look, like we can expand the team. And you're keeping some of the other variables the same. Is that kind of how you found like that team was able to navigate and steer through things?
Yeah, on both fronts, I think you've actually like you've encapsulated exactly what happened. So in the early days, because we were sort of onboarding new people into the camp, a lot of the process sort of remained the same, and we were able to kind of bring people in pretty easily before sort of moving them to their forever teams, whilst we still had like a group of people that were fairly stable. And then later on, to kind of digress to a little bit of history lesson, like we acquired the Now Performance product. And so our team was asked to kind of second over there and go and work in a new domain. But because, the team had remained pretty stable and like there were, some processes and ways of working that were pretty normal for us, we were able to go out there and then smash out a couple of projects pretty easily. So that worked out. That worked out pretty well, and pretty much all of the team ended up sort of staying in that area of the product by one team member who decided to sort of stay where we were based over at the time.
Awesome. And like, so you mentioned like the trio, right? And I think this is interesting because I don't know, I find obviously different places operate differently, but I feel like some people may go through most or all of their engineering career and not necessarily experience something like that. So for example, like I have had something very similar to what you're talking about, like with having a trio at Microsoft right now. Like we have, at least in the teams I'm working with, we have like engineers, and we do have product managers and engineering managers. And so the product managers we work with kind of depends on the team, right? Because as platform teams, especially, I find that a lot of product is driven sort of by engineering needs. So, and what I'm about to say is I'm not trying to like minimize roles or anything like that. I find a lot of the value that I get working with project managers is their ability in this current setup, their ability to help navigate with other teams. Like, what are other teams doing? What are their milestones? Like, how do we start bridging some of these gaps? So I find that more like closer to some like types of project management that I've experienced before. But in the past, it's been like I rely on product managers very heavily to go talk to customers and get the user feedback and help translate like what are users struggling with or opportunities, like how do we translate that into like engineering, so like we partner that way. And QA, not now at Microsoft, but when I used to work at a smaller startup, I worked with QA, and I ended up having like we kind of moved on my teams, at least, our QA away from like less like manual testing, more into like test strategy is kind of how we looked at things. Anyway, that's just a little bit of background. So I was kind of curious, when you're thinking about like a trio coming together, how does like, can you talk through that, like what that looks like for folks that maybe haven't heard of that, and like, and why you find that beneficial?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it was really interesting to hear about that last part that you were saying too, about that sort of shift between manual testing to test strategy, because we sort of undergone the same thing. The
And I realized that was very loaded. There was a lot of stuff there. So
no, it's just the so with the initial trio that we had with the first team that ran at Culture Amp, that was partially too is like even outside of like the trios that kind of like already existed at Culture Amp that time, where you typically sort of see, for folks that are listening, you typically sort of see a product manager, probably a designer and a tech lead, sort of forming that leadership group of the team. So for my team, that was mostly about small improvements and bugs. I had our senior QA for the entire camp. We had a product manager and myself. We didn't really have like a designer attached to us. And in that case, with our team and all the different things that we were trying to do, and just like our remit that both kind of just covered our team and then the broader camp, it made a lot of sense to me, particularly as someone that was just really stepping into leadership at this company for the first time, that I've got these people here with like experience that need to know what's going on a daily basis, that need to know what I'm doing. I probably need to know what they're doing. And together we can try and strategize, and come up with a plan cross-functionally about how we're going to tackle that day, that week, that month. Fast forward to now, most, not all sort of product teams at Culture Amp will typically have like a team lead, which is more or less like a engineering manager, a technical engineering manager at the head of the team. They will have a designer, typically, and a product manager, and that will sort of form that sort of trio. So you've got different people able to represent, the why, the what, and the how in terms of how we go about building and delivering product, and generally like one sort of point of accountability for the people and the outcomes of the team, which tends to be the team lead. So in terms of how that works, like since sort of doing other sort of leadership things, for me, again, that's just I find anyway that the best outcomes that we're going to get is when we work cross-functionally and kind of like understanding that like not only like what our customers want and why will help us shape, like you said, those engineering solutions that we might actually build. So rather than building something that's unnecessary or not valuable, it's going, oh, okay, you want this, you say you want this particular solution, but I can give you that same outcome over here for less time and energy and effort. Particularly when working with designers, like actually going ahead and figuring out how to problem solve, how to like enable users to actually go through the very features that we're trying to build in a reasonable way. And a lot of the best designers and teams that I've worked with have been just super tight with our front-end engineers in particular, just in terms of that close collaboration as well. Between the three of us, gradually starting to build a strategy for going, look, we've got all these things that all these outcomes we're trying to achieve. Like, how do we do that with the time that we have, with the team that we have, with the tech we have, and then like you said too, like, with the other teams around us in the ecosystem and what they're working on and when. But yeah, that's I found that generally to be a pretty successful model, and it's not. Everyone's kind of coming at it from like a slightly different angle. So you're going to have points where you're going to like disagree or like,
sure, yeah.
You're wanting to have like sort of like challenging, difficult conversations. But everyone I've found a culture I'm in that sort of position's always come up with a pretty openly and like sort of earnestly in terms of just trying to like get to a good outcome. So it's been pretty good.
Well, so again, thank you for walking through that. I think that's helpful, like framing to see how these pieces come together. But yeah, the next part that I wanted to kind of pick your brain about was around healthy conflict, right? So when you have individuals that are representing sort of different areas, it's, of course, like you're saying, you're coming together with a common goal, right? It's not, we're going to take three people who obviously don't want to work in the same direction, pit them against each other, see who is the best Pokemon battler or arm wrestler, whatever it happens to be. Just like, it's not like one person comes out as the winner. That's not the goal. So when you put three people together that are representing different functions to reach a common goal, you're still going to have situations where, like, based on the framing and the perspective, someone's going to be thinking like, hey, like, I think that we really need to, like, I value, these sets of things. Someone else might value these sets of things. Of course, there's common values. So I'm curious, when it comes to like difficult conversations, like and I don't even know where I want to go with this question necessarily, but like, what are the types of things that need to happen in order to get to a point where you can have difficult conversations that, and again, maybe for folks listening, when I'm saying difficult conversations, I mean, like, you have to have like a healthy debate. It's not, again, not to like who speaks the loudest or it's like a shouting match or something. It's, how do you get to a point where people feel comfortable that they can say like, hey, like, this is my opinion, I am willing to listen to yours. Like, what does that look like to get to that spot?
Yeah. In terms of what it looks like to get to that spot, I'm just sort of thinking about like one of the cases where it's like sort of been really successful for us. And I think no matter what, like, you've got to have like a strong sort of basis of psychological safety, like, let alone for like the team, but like for that trio up front, right? Though you kind of talked about it when we were talking about like sort of, the value, like, that's not how you network, right? So like, even when you're working with the same, two other people, and your job is to kind of like lead that team to success and to an outcome every day, you really have to decide, like, is this a you versus them thing, or is this going to be like a you all together thing, and to try and figure out like how does everyone like to work? How do you like to take and receive feedback?
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite thing to do on a weekend? Why is it like a terrible idea to talk to Tom before he's at a coffee at like 9 o'clock in the morning, sort of thing, and really kind of like get in there and build those relationships and get to know each other. Really, all it sounds like I'm going, look, hey, if you build strong psychological safety, then you can have those kind of difficult conversations. But it's more just about like when we actually empathize with each other, when we understand each other better as humans, it's a lot easier to kind of go, okay, cool, you've told me this thing, like that we need to do this by this date. We've got all these other kind of competing priorities. Like, just it's an easier step for me to take if I've got that empathy there to go, okay, just help me understand why. Like, help me understand where you're coming from, so that we can actually broach that conversation. And they're not saying it because they, at this sort of like level and stage, those folks aren't like saying that they want something to you because they're just trying to give you a hard time, or they're just trying to get like, ideally, they're not just trying to get like a marker in their promotion. They're saying it either because maybe like it's actually the genuine best thing for us to work on, or it's like priorities have changed. And then, if you can kind of build the right environment where you can kind of come up with those conversations with empathy, but also kind of create a space for you to be curious about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I wouldn't say that I don't then have difficult conversations, but it takes a lot of the sting out of it already if we're kind of able to approach it with that curiosity and empathy out of the gate.
Yeah, those two things that you said right at the end there, I think are like my key things that I personally take away from that. And when I'm as you're talking, I'm trying to do some reflection, because I'm like, if I'm going to ask this question, I should probably think about it for myself too. So like the idea of being genuinely curious, right? Like if you're going to be debating with people, and again, you don't want to go into it to be like, I'm here to stir the pot and piss people off. It's like we want to move forward in a direction, and you might have perspective on something, an opinion, you might have data to back that up, and that's great. So you're coming at it from a direction. If someone is like, I don't agree with that, or I have this other approach that happens to be at odds with yours, instead of just going immediately to like, okay, well, how do I like how do I bury this person? How do I make sure that like my answer is the right answer and I come out on top? Like if your thought process is that way, you're probably not going to be very successful at this. But the the opportunity to like to stop and go, okay, well, hold on, like I know that I like have trust and respect with this person. If they have a completely different approach, and I'm exaggerating, right? I'm saying completely different, maybe it's slightly different, whatever. It's something that I didn't come up with. It's something different than my solution. If I like take the opportunity to try and listen and understand genuinely, not just let them speak so that I can jump in and say, okay, thanks for sharing anyway, then and you can actually learn from them. There's probably information that you didn't know. There might be the same information, like the same data, but you're realizing, oh, they're valuing these other things, or stakeholders are valuing these things differently. And now that you know that, like maybe that does kind of shift your perspective. But the first part was really like making sure that you're being genuinely curious and interested when people have different opinions, because without that, I feel like you're not really setting yourself up to like be willing to make progress. And the other part that you said around empathy, I kind of chuckled when you said it, because I strongly believe in it, and it sounds kind of funny, but like when you're like, hey, like, what do you do on weekends, right? Like when I talk to people about forming better relationships at work, it's not like you have to, I'm not saying you have to be best friends with everyone at work and hang out with them and all that. Like you can keep everything totally separate. But when it comes to like actually having better working relationships, I feel like if you can create a little bit of opportunity to be curious about the person and like what they are like as a human, and not just like exactly what they do like in their role. I say this a lot for people trying to have like especially better working relationships with their manager, because some people that I talk to are like, yeah, like my manager doesn't know anything about me. Like I feel like my one-on-ones are status updates. I'm like, you can take, it sounds kind of silly, take some of that time and just like talk like people would. Like
Yeah, yeah,
create some space where you can learn about each other, right?
yeah,
Again, I'm not saying you have to overshare with your manager, and I'm just saying a little bit of opportunity to be like, this is another human being.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Actually, that last part, just even having, again, it's hard, right? Like, it's hard when you're the direct report to the manager, but just having that little bit of moment to kind of go, look, hey, like, if this is for this relationship to work really, really well for both of us, like, I feel like I don't know you well enough. So can we,
Yeah.
and just sort of sit in that a little bit and just be once again, like, I'd love to get to know you more. Like, let's actually talk about anything other than work for like the next, 20 minutes or whatever it is. To your point, though, the other thing was so I've pretty much only ever run remote teams apart from the job before now. And one of my favorite stand-up questions was we just do like a stand-up rituals. We do like a question of the day. And it was just like, yeah, like a short question just to get to know each other better. My favorite questions were always the one where I'd give them something they could be really, really opinionated about, but that had zero consequences. So, like, objectively
Okay.
worst biscuit, or like objectively worst like cookie, or like the food that you think is entirely overrated. Something to kind of get a reaction out of someone and then get a few laughs, maybe, but like not to kind of like start arguments over. And it was it was good fun for that.
That's funny because like I haven't tried that at work, but I recently in the past year I've been going to the gym for forever, as long as I've been programming. But my wife does CrossFit, and last year I said I'm going to stop bodybuilding. I'm going to go do CrossFit with my wife. And one thing that they periodically do, because CrossFit has a lot of like community aspect to it, but they'll sometimes do like a question of the day, and it's very interesting because like I'm not a psychologist. My wife is a therapist, so she knows all about this stuff. But I find it very interesting that we take these opportunities at something like CrossFit for that's a lot of community building, trying to, like the environment that you're dropped into with that is very supportive, right? Like you on some days, like yeah, like you have scores and stuff, so it's like who if you finish the workout fastest, your time's going to be better than someone else's. So there's competition and stuff built into it, but if someone finished first and say there's someone in the class, it's actually me a lot of the time. I'm very slow. I'm strong, but I'm very slow. My cardio is terrible. So like I might be last a lot, but there's going to be people that are like cheering for you and stuff in the class. And I find that like, you know, I feel a lot of that comes from really simple things that we might overlook, things like a question of the day, things where you're just trying to get to know people a little bit better. And it honestly does not take, what's the right way to say this? It's simple. Sometimes people might not find it easy because they're like, oh, maybe it's awkward or I don't know how to do it. So I don't mean to say that it's easy, but some of these things are so simple to do because it's literally just be a like a decent human being to other
Yeah,
people, and then some of this stuff just happens, right?
yeah. I was thinking about what you were saying, where you're saying I love that part where you're saying that some people are just like sort of cheering you on as you're wrapping up, and I wondered like how much just like those small acts of just creating community, creating that question of the day really helps people see each other as like just other humans kind of going about it, and creates a much
Yeah.
more supportive atmosphere than otherwise might have.
Yeah. I think like I know it, like I don't have evidence. I don't have like a data or like studies that like show this, but like I feel like it genuinely helps a lot because when you have enough of this over time, you see people as other people. Like they are living their lives. They got families. Some of them don't. Some of them move in jobs. Some like they're just other people. And instead of looking at them like it, like I'm taking the CrossFit example, instead of being like, hey, you're a direct competition to me, and like you are time and numbers because that's all that I'm kind of equating myself to with you. It's not like in the moment when you're trying to push past and see if you can get the best time or something. I think a lot of people anyway, they're focused on themselves. But if you were highly competitive, I am not, then you might be kind of doing that and be like, oh, I gotta out this person, like I gotta get the best score. But when you're done, like you're absolutely cheering everyone on. And I think that a lot of it comes down to it's because you're seeing them as other people. And for people that are listening to this, I realize that might sound super fluffy, kind of woo woo, but like I would say this, I'm sure there's other sort of careers and professions, but in software engineering, like it's people. Like you are solving
Yeah.
technical problems, but you're not doing it alone, and the people part is so important.
Yeah, 100%. Have you ever seen Nick Means's talk,
I
Eiffel's
think we
Tower?
just delayed a little bit there.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just
You're
caught
back.
up. Yeah,
Cool.
sorry. Have you
Good.
seen Nick Means's talk, Eiffel's Tower?
I have not. No.
The, Basically, the entire point of the talk is exactly what you were talking about, where
Okay.
the big takeaway, like without spoiling too much, is like, hey, like, it actually took a lot of people, like, and a lot of buy-in, a lot of relationship building just to get the Eiffel Tower built. It's a fantastic story, but it's just anyone who works in engineering really just kind of that thing. If like you want to build great things, you're going to have to do it with other people, and you're going to have to find those points of connection, no matter how small they are. And even like to your point too, if like you're having a hard time with your manager, just just finding those points of connection. Like there's always something, and it's always a good like when you find it too, and you just start riffing on. Your actually, we had a new starter the other week, and he and I were talking about just a shared love of a particular like of D&D and a particular video game, and just kind of like riffing on that, and it was great. It just immediately kind of set the scene for the rest of the conversation. It's awesome.
Right. And it's like it's a very simple thing, right? I'm not
Yeah,
not saying that it's easy for someone to do that, because if you're listening to this, you're like you might be going, okay, like sure, you want me to go talk to my manager about video games,
yeah,
and it's like, look, like I'm saying it's simple. If you start like easing into it, finding opportunities where you can have small conversations about things that aren't necessarily work, or they could be work too, and you're finding different things to talk about, but the point is like trying to understand more about the other person in a more natural way. Like
yeah,
I think it can go super far. I have employees on my team, and by the way, I think especially for managers, like if there's managers listening to this, if you're like, I don't know anything about my team, I highly recommend take all
yeah,
of your next one-on-ones. Just take the one-on-ones and go talk to your people about them. Again, don't force them to go talk about their private life if they're not interested in that. But like
yeah,
I have an employee that loves to hike. I have an employee that she's very focused on her son going through school and things like that. I have another employee who's getting more into the gym. Like there's you can all these things that you start spending time with people. One of the things that comes out from that is that people really feel, and it's not like an illusion, so I don't mean to say like it's going to be dishonest here, but like people really feel that you do care for them. They realize that like they can trust and respect you. This is a type of stuff that when you build it up over time, like you as managers or senior engineers or anything, like sometimes yes, the title and the role gets you a little bit of that trust and respect, but I never want people to rely on that and to be like, look, my
yeah,
title says X, therefore you must. It's like, no, you still have to go build and earn the trust and respect. And it can happen a lot through these little conversations where people are like, oh, you actually do listen to me.
yeah.
Like you do understand me. I am heard. I am seen. And so I feel like that's just again, it's such an opportunity to get that from the people that you work with.
Yeah, yeah. It is actually genuinely one of the best parts, is because when you get to know them as a person and you can help them as a person, and then you see what they accomplish, it's just that much more gratifying as well as a manager.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. And so Tom, I know like we talked a little bit before, and I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot. I know you said for some of the things that we're talking that you have slides. I don't know, not to
Yeah,
necessarily share because I think there's might be some technical things, but I wanted to give you an opportunity if there was aspects to some of these things that if you wanted to take the opportunity to like we can kind of shift the conversation to touch on some of those things more specifically.
yeah, sure. So maybe it's worth actually starting with a little bit of context. So,
Sure.
uh, was it? This would be almost 5 years ago now. So I am Australian. I'm based in South Australia, and at the time, about 5 years ago, most of my team were based in Melbourne. We did have some folks in Queensland. We had one one person in Argentina, and one person in the States, but most of our team members were based in Melbourne. The reason I sort of set that up, and the reason I talk about that with respect to our work, is that, you know, at this point in time, we were sort of like midway through our second project that had gone like well beyond a deadline, and most of my team are stuck in lockdown in Melbourne, which means that, you know, they really weren't able to kind of like leave their homes, and their 8 hours a day that they were spending at work kind of sucked. So, you know, the reason I sort of set that scene up in order to kind of like give some context. So let's see if I can figure out how to share the screen here.
Are you like? Yep. I can switch the layout if.
I should.
Or I don't.
I will. I've got a double monitor. It just might look a little bit big, so I might just a little bit small.
I think,
I should say.
Okay, let me try this, and then I can add to stage, and I think we got it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so the reason I said that context is, so at CultureAmp, in the area that I was working, we run a performance product. It runs twice a year. We're the second time round through a project that's gone well behind deadline. And part of that too is that when you go very far over like what an estimated deadline was, you know, your product manager and designer aren't just going to go sit there waiting for things to happen. But we've got this problem where, because of those sort of end of year pressures, there's also this pressure on to have like all these things in place come performance cycle season. And really what I'm want to do and thinking about is how to take this massive build, measure, learn loop and not only get faster at going through that loop, like, you know, building the product, you know, measuring, did we actually do the thing, taking that learning in before we build something again, but also reducing the size of it as well, right? Okay. So we want to take it from there to there, like ideally. And so the reasons, let me just stop sharing for a sec. There we go. The reason I set all that context up is because, like, we've got an opportunity with we had a newish sort of like tech lead kind of join us at that time. We had a new product manager coming in, and sort of looking at some like future work coming up. Something needed to change, right? Because otherwise, like on paper, the team's great, like great psychological safety, really good kind of like environment for the team to be in. Everyone kind of gets along with each other, but like clearly something's going wrong because we're just missing important kind of timeframes. So it's around this time that I'm thinking a lot about like, okay, well, we can cut our work small. We can kind of go back to how I used to work in that previous team where we were delivering pretty regularly. But what do I do about like estimation? Like, we still need to be able to communicate when something's going to be done, but we're by any means of measurement clearly terrible at it. So we tried stuff like confidence intervals and like percentages, and I just couldn't get past this general idea that what I was asking folks to do is to spend a lot of time thinking about all the possible sort of variances in work and all the things that might happen over the course of a period of time, and go like, give me a magic number, right, that it's going to somehow satisfy you know, our stakeholders in that equation. And that, you know, if we're on target, great. If we're off target, you know, we could kind of manage that conversation, but the longer that conversation goes on, the more friction there is, right? And you, as much as I would like it not to be the case, it's very easy for like estimations to become expectations, and it's unfortunately or fortunately, like, you know, at the start of the project, you know the least about what you're going to do.
Right. Yeah.
So what I was sort of like thinking about this and sort of ruminating on this and just kind of going, look, you know, the fact is, like, we're always wrong about this. I don't really want to keep focusing and putting all this energy and attention into estimation. So I'd rather focus on like, did we deliver the value? Can we make the work smaller? I'd rather us get to be, you know, really make the team as good as we can. And around this time, a colleague, Mark Barber, sort of said, oh, you should definitely check out Little's Law. And so what do you mean? Like, I was pretty new to like actually really focusing on like delivery, as opposed to just the technical stuff. And he kind of gave me like the Little's Law equation, and I'm gonna share my screen again. Let me go. Fired. Sorry, it's not the.
All good. No worries.
Let's see. There we go. Share this window.
There we go.
Share. And we'll hit play on that. That'll probably ask me again. Yep. Share. Let's go find it. Sorry, we'll probably need to edit some of that out. I've reduced it a fair bit, but effectively, and sorry, Mark, your image is on the screen now. It's a good thing you're okay with it. The amount of time remaining on your work is, equivalent to the amount of stories done divided by your work in progress divided by your average cycle time. Now, there's a bit of nuance to that, and we'll probably talk about that. But really, if you boil it down, it's really just the time for a queue to process is the size of queue divided by how fast the queue moves. You see that when you're waiting outside to go into somewhere, you're like, oh, it's moving pretty quick. I'll be in 5 minutes. Oh, it's moving pretty slow, or it's a long queue. It might take me a while. And so he sort of suggested I start tracking in Jira, all of our stories and their cycle times. So how long did it take to move from in progress to done? Okay. Oh, come on. Where's my mouse now? There we are. It wouldn't let me go to the right one again.
You're trapped.
So yeah, we started tracking that in a spreadsheet for this small project, because I'm like, okay, cool. You're telling me that I can get this magic 8 ball and I'm going to know when my work's going to be done. Yeah, sure, pal, whatever. But we'll try it. And at the time, I sort of skunk worked it a bit, because second one's like, oh, when's it going to be done by? I'm like, oh, we've given it an appetite of 6 weeks, which was true, but I was just like, well, I'm pretty sure it's a smaller project that the risk is not there. But we tracked it all in a spreadsheet, had a look at that stuff moving through, and it was pretty accurate. We didn't have everyone in the team working on that project, but we were able to go, yes, we're going to land within this date and this date. So we took a couple of learnings out of that. And we started importing out into the next project. So number one was we were already pretty engaged with a good refinement process by that stage. We'd started adjusting our refinement in a kind of a Kanban-esque thing. So we'd started moving, we'd had a prioritized list of work. And as we go into our refinement sessions, we time box them to about an hour and a half. But we just kind of work our way from top to bottom, just gradually refining the work and bringing it up so that the stuff at the top there, anyone could grab and we could kind of run with and execute with. The reason that was important was it really enabled folks to have a really clear understanding of why we were doing something, what they needed to do, and they could just kind of pull the card and execute on it, which was good, because then it meant folks that it might have been a growth opportunity for could grab it, as well as folks that just wanted to bash it out. But it became the team's work. The other things, because we already had that in place, the rest of the stuff we could do quite well. So one thing with Little's Law and that coming up with an actual forecast as opposed to an estimate is that's going to work best if you have small size projects, you scope your projects as small as they can. And if you have your cards the same size. So you try and make your slicing as evenly as possible. We'll talk about why in a second. You also want to try and keep your work in progress limits manageable, so that if you have too many people working on too many things, the amount of time that you're going to spend on, say, code review will go up, just because there's not enough people to be able to context switch. And then what else did we do? Just thinking about if there's anything else. Really, those were we talk about this later, but also sort of looking at sort of things that would block us. So if for whatever reason there was something that needed additional discovery, or maybe it's already in the flow of work and we know that we sort of hit into a little bit of a blocker, we would sort of swarm around that. So bigger picture, what we started doing is we took the learnings out of that project really, where that we could see that we could deliver and we could forecast, but we also knew that that equation's only part of it. So I said, you divide by the average cycle time. You're really dividing by the average cycle time as your lower bound, but your upper bound also includes the amount of variability in that cycle time. So the game for us became, okay, like in order to kind of be as accurate with this forecasting as we want to be, we need to really kind of reduce that variation. We need to reduce that variability. And that, for us, we started, doing things like user story mapping. We were already doing like the refinement sessions. We were getting really aggressive about our slicing. We were really kind of like mobbing around and pairing up on issues that were like blockers in order to kind of move them through. Really kind of meant that over time, our cycle time really kind of like dropped into like a sort of steady state, and we'd still have a certain amount of variance, but that was like 2 days.
Yeah.
So with that 2-day variance, what that meant was that I could pretty accurately go to our stakeholders with each release. We're going to release, this week, sometime between this time and this time, pretty consistently. And over time, enough trust kind of built up where the questions stopped being about, okay, well, when's this thing going to be delivered? And started being like, okay, how are we measuring the value? What's coming up next? What are we thinking about this and that and the other? Which are much, much healthier conversations with your stakeholders than, hey, why is this 3 months behind you? Yeah.
Right. I have 2 questions that, as you're chatting through, I've had historically teams, not at Microsoft, prior to Microsoft, doing Kanban-esque style work. And even before that, without Kanban, because I wanted to ask about WIP limits. The other thing was really around estimations, and when I'm saying estimations here, I mean like the thing that you're mentioning about getting things to be similar in terms of size, let's say.
Yeah.
So the first question I wanted to ask is like, did you have any strategies, or did it come together more naturally for managing how much debate or time goes into like getting on the same page for how much effort or the scope of something? And to elaborate a little bit, I know you're not exactly saying this, but if I've done like story point estimates and stuff, like the typical thing would be like someone's like, that's a 3, and someone's like, that's a million, and you're like, well, okay. And then you have this debate for 45 minutes, and you're like, okay, well, you probably could have done it in the 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So like, what did that look like? That's the first question around getting people to like kind of align to, hey, the goal is to get things to be similar size.
Yep. So for me, there's different ways of doing this, but for me, the way that I would kind of like the axes I would kind of slice on was go like, the question I'd ask is this around 3 days worth of work? And that's, you do it, okay, cool, but you're still estimating. And that's true, but the difference is that you can quickly answer that question. You have to think a lot about like I don't know where I'm going to be in like a month's time. Let alone my work, right? But I do know, like, yeah, I think I can work on that for 3 days, and that's probably going to be about done. That's a very quick kind of answered question. The reason I ended up kind of couching to that was because that was sort of starting to become present in some of the data that we were already collecting. It required very quick thinking, like you could just answer that question. Yes, you'd get different... you'd get a little bit of variance in terms of like who was asking that, whether that be an associate or a junior engineer to a senior. But the way that I kind of took that was that variance would ultimately be baked into like that variance in cycle time anyway. So as long as most people are like, yeah, I think that's around about 3 days, I was like, okay, great. And as it happened anyway with our cycle time, and we were working on a particularly legacy code base around that time, that 3 days was mostly pretty consistently 5 days, but it didn't matter. It just like, are we getting something consistently the same size? And enough of the data to kind of back that up proved out really well. And in terms of constraining the time, because by that stage too, we'd kind of done everything we could to go to really refine and shape that work. If the answer was no, it was usually a case of going, well, one, do we need to slice that further so it is 3 days worth of work so we feel comfortable? And we just immediately jumped to that question because that was usually pretty revealing. If the answer was no, sometimes it does need to be like 5-6 days. But we just put like a lot of good, we just make sure there was good signal around it. So I don't know if you find the same thing, especially with like purely technical pieces of work that you just kind of need to manage. So we just do that same thing. We just keep a lot of visibility on it. We probably treat it as a priority, which meant that if folks needed like reviews or jumped in, we just do everything we can to get it out of that queue, that system of work as quickly as we could.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. And like you're saying, there's sometimes there's work where maybe it's not even that it's complex, but you're like, hey, look, like for me to get through that, I know, like in my head, I know exactly what I have to do, and it's gonna take me like I'm just gonna have to grind through it for. It's not gonna be 3 days, but like I feel actually pretty confident that if I can churn through it, like it's gonna be 5, 6 days, whatever. But the risk is almost low in that case because like the complexity isn't necessarily there. When the complexity and the amount of like ambiguity in what's being done is great, and that's the reason for the 5, 6 whatever days, then it's like, okay, maybe that is let's go back to the drawing board and kind of chop it up
Yeah.
a bit. But the last thing that you said that is literally the next question I have is around whip limits. And
Yep.
so I personally, I think I only had one team where I don't want to say took this seriously. A lot of my teams were like I would call them continuous improvement. So if we tried something and it wasn't working, great, let's try the next experiment, keep
Yep.
evolving. But I had one team that kind of arrived at like Kanban ish, and the ish part is like retrospectives and whip limits. That was kind of
Yep.
what we focused on. And we had what I thought was a pretty good system for, like, we set some whip limits, we were tuning them and stuff. And I was curious, like, did you have to do anything to get people bought into that? So for example, you were just saying, okay, like if we have to get people onto code reviews to start pushing things through, whatever, like how do you get a team to be into that versus like, hey man, let me just work on my story, like I want to get my work done?
Yeah. 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 I mean, going a few steps back, like even before we started this process, that buy-in was pretty crucial. I mean, we had a good basis of psychological safety, but I met with every single member of the team and kind of go, look, this is what I'm thinking. This is in terms of our strategy, like how I think we could be working a little bit better. And everyone ultimately ended up also contributing, their own 2 cents, their own opinions about things we could tweak or things that they'd like to change, right? Which most of those ideas in some form or fashion or like some component of it would make it into how we worked. And that also proved to sort of increase that level of buy-in because folks actually felt like they had a stake in it because they did. On the ongoing sort of basis in terms of getting buy-in for like things like whips and working together as a team, like you said, that just took a while of kind of reinforcing going, like having, then you just kind of like wind back a little bit, like even with like the slicing, like I'm a big believer in that I only really want to be doing something if it actually serves the team. So if it doesn't serve the team, then it's just no point. So same with like the buy-in on the whip limit. Like, so what we would start doing is we would set a team goal, and we'd have like, we wouldn't be so kind of rigid to go like we're going to try and get this many stories done by the end of the sprint. We go, look, this is the outcome that we're driving for, and you can pull in cards whenever, but this is the outcome we're driving for. And over time, we started changing that conversation, and a lot of the engineers, the team, were already really great at this anyway. But it became a lot more about the team really owns its work. This is the team's work. This is the team's cards. This is the team's goal. And so if we didn't hit that goal, it's not one individual's fault. It's on us as a team anyway.
Right.
And then so for the whip limit stuff, part of that too was beyond just like helping reduce that variance in cycle time. Part of that was just that a lot of what was baked into what we were doing was about making sure that we were sharing that context and knowledge and understanding across the team, and about optimizing for like learning and development and growth. So sometimes that meant that with our whip limit, it typically meant that there was at least one group of people pairing and sharing knowledge and kind of like going back to what you were saying earlier, like building relationships, building trust, or just leaning onto that mentoring bit, or just collaborating. Sometimes it might mean an individual was going off and doing a tech health thing, but at the same time, the priority was still, we're working on this particular goal as a group of people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think in the the team I had, the scenario where I had folks that were kind of operating this way, I think one of the things that I don't know if it was like the side effect of the whip limits or the other way around, but like being able to have this conversation of like this was we did monthly releases and 2 week sprints, but being able to say like this is what's going into the release and being like hell yeah, like that's exciting, was pretty cool because if we had a lot of stuff that was in progress and we would reach like the end of the month, we're like, okay, well, you can't ship the
Yeah.
17 things that are in progress. So like that means that yeah, sure, the next sprint we're gonna have a ton of stuff that lands. That's gonna feel great. And so maybe on average overall throughout the entire year, maybe it ends up being the same, let's say. But I would actually argue probably not, because with too many things in progress, there's a lot of overhead for context switching. That aside, that having folks being bought into like this feels like exciting and like, hey, if I actually help you with this thing somehow, like if we work together on this, doesn't matter if it's, oh, you need me to start reviewing this. We had for digital forensics, sometimes it was like we needed to generate data for mobile phones. And it's like, hey, like you're wrapping this one up and like we know we want to get this one in. Let me go generate the data for that. Like, yeah, like I'm a software developer, and for me to go send a bunch of text messages on a phone or something, like maybe that's not the most thrilling for me. But what is really exciting is that I can be part of landing this feature with you. And like, I'm going to go start on that right now so that, that's the next thing in WIP that we can unlock. Cool. When you're done, or you're getting help from someone else to wrap up that work, great. We can kind of basically swarm doing this work so that we can get this one last thing in, and having people rally behind that. That's what I'm saying. I don't know which way it
Yeah.
was like, both. I don't know.
How good does it feel when you're in that spot where like it feels like everyone's got each other's back, and it's just like helping
Yeah.
to kind of realize that things that you don't feel like feels so much better than just sort of like feeling like you're alone in it. It feels like you're okay, cool. Such and such is helping me. Oh, now we're free. We're gonna go help. Such and such other team member, and then it's like it feels like you're all kicking goals together, which is just really great.
Yeah, and like again, for folks that have been in that scenario, if you've never been in that scenario and the only sort of working environment has been like, I pick up the next feature or bug fix for me, I go work on that mostly in isolation. Maybe, yeah, got to get people to sign off on the code review. Maybe I have a design doc and that's the only other time I'm getting feedback. Like when those are your only sort of touch points, it often, and I'm not saying it's impossible to work this way, but I feel like it often is kind of like a group of individuals versus like a team of people working together. And when you have that experience of like anyone on the team has your back at any given moment, it feels like it's really cool, because I'm sure lots of people have experienced this at some point, and maybe not if you're very junior, but at some point in your career you've been working hard on stuff and you're kind of looking around you being like, man, like I don't know, like I feel like I'm doing a lot. It doesn't feel like you start to kind of look at maybe what other people on the team are doing and you're like, oh, it doesn't really feel fair, or like how are we only getting this much done? And it just kind of feels like frustrating, and sometimes like I don't want to say why even bother, but kind of like I don't know, like if I put in more effort,
Yeah,
it's not moving the needle on anything, and it just feels demotivating and disengaging. But you literally invert the entire feeling when you're like, wait a second, like everyone else is willing to jump in and help, and it's wild how much that transforms things.
yeah, 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 100% that, and it just becomes that. It just becomes that extra kind of like engine for like driving and building like safety and trust in the team, and like actually creating a team of people as opposed to like a bunch of individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have there's without getting into the details of it, but like I think in the one of the teams I have right now, they're starting to experience a little bit of that. They're dealing with a couple of technical challenges that have surfaced over the past few weeks, and it really feels like the few of them that have worked in different parts of that, they're jumping in to support each other. It's a live service and stuff too, so sometimes that means they're working at different hours where like maybe aren't their normal core hours, but like I'm trying to make sure they're supported. Like, hey, I know you worked late, like start late the next day, take the day off, whatever. Like I'm trying to do what I can, but it's really cool that like I'm not chasing them to be like, hey, you got to go help so and so, like go get this stuff done. They're just in it, and they're like, they're proud of their work. They're happy to help each other, and like for me, like that's a proud feeling. I can't take the credit for it, but like I'm like, hey, like that's what I want in a team, because I love to see them help each other. So I think that is because they know each other well. They've been working on, they work together, and it's not just, well, sorry, it sucks that your work is on fire. I'm gonna go take the next feature.
Yeah.
And so, Tom, now we're coming up on time here. Is there anything else from like in terms of the slides and stuff that you had that were like other maybe sort of like final core points to
let me
touch on?
Go share through that again.
I realize I kind of interrupted you because I had a couple of questions, but
I loving the conversation. Let me go. Where are we? Would help if
hey, talk about this. Wait a second, I have a question for you that's going to take up all the rest of the time.
It's just going to show that I could continue talking about this for at length for ages. So actually, let me skip past. I wish I didn't have the animations in there now.
Animations are the best part.
That was presenting. So we talked a little bit about like some of the team impacts of things like work in progress limits, refinement. I'd reinforce the things like having a user story map like just at the start to try and like deliberately help reduce the size of your scope. So reducing that input even before it gets into your queue is really, really valuable. But again, just kind of like as with everything else, right? Like all of the strategy and stuff that we're applying is also about like sort of building that sort of like shared understanding, getting people like aligned, and understanding of like the outcomes that we're driving over. So before we've even like, done any really serious wireframing, like having that user story mapping is great just to kind of think about something about it going, look, actually, maybe we can achieve this way or this way, which can really help permeate its way through that design solution without necessarily being as detailed as we have sometimes had it in the past, I should say. Okay. And just even like doing one of the things that I would find a little frustrating too, with not only kind of being overscheduled, is because we're in this place where we were doing too much work up front, is we'd release something and then we get all this kind of feedback that would have been great towards the start of the project or earlier in where we could have actually made really significant changes to that architecture to kind of support it. So for me, like part of this is really just about like we're wrong on our estimates. We're probably wrong on what the customer wants, even with all the data that we have in front of us. Let's get this out there as soon as we can in a state that we're, like reasonably happy with, but like a really small version of it so that we can actually go, yeah, cool, we're wrong here. Let's go fix this up and let's like actually like iterate and improve. One of the other stuff. One of the other things I didn't talk about with WIP too is just by deliberately setting that WIP limit a little bit less than the team. One of the big things that I wanted to reduce was the amount of stress in that team, right? Like, so if all my estimates are kind of based on like a WIP limit that's about at least 20% less than the team's overall capacity. Like if someone needs to go on holiday or become sick or anything kind of like happens in that short term, it doesn't matter. I've got like buffer. I don't have to worry about that. That's just not a problem, and that takes all the stress out of the team. Talk about slicing, and that's kind of a little bit of a visual of what we've been doing with regards to slicing in terms of just kind of, moving that up, where like a lot of my focus in those sessions are really just kind of like on the next 2 to 6 weeks and talking about and building that more complete picture of what we're going to be trying to do. And over time, like what we'd find is like that would ultimately end up in less rework. You and I talked about like test strategies towards the start of this conversation, and a lot of this for us too would also involve like shifting left on quality. So we'd have those questions like, talking about the different things that we'd be testing for, how we're going to test it, so that by the time we released it, we felt really confident in what we're releasing. And the difference in the amount of like bugs that we tackled between releases before and after this was quite dramatic in terms of just because we're thinking about lots of small things. It's easier to reason about small things, and I suppose that's probably the takeaway of any of this. It is fundamentally easier to reason and think through and plan around small things. Anything you can do to make it small and consistently small, you're gonna end up with a better result in terms of like the flow of that delivery and then your ability to repeatedly deliver results. And then ironically, like both had more meetings in terms of like we had a refinement session, we would have our retro, we would have like, demo sessions, but overall we'd spend less time in meetings because a lot of that context was already kind of there in those cards when we were doing that slicing and that refinement. We talked about 3 days worth of work. And you talked about like different ways that we'd sort of slice. So we might slice by instead of just like, is it 3 days worth of work? We'd look for like different themes in the story. So we'd go like, hey, is there, like if the card said like admin or another role, like a manager, like in the actual card, like as an admin or manager, I want to be able to do this. Like that's a straight sign to me that that's something that we can slice there in order to kind of like make that work move through a little bit more smoothly. So maybe we just deliver the admin portion first or the manager portion, or maybe we'd start like splitting out like different functions, or just looking for anything like an and or an or in the story would usually be a good indicator that we could kind of like take that work out and kind of slice it a little bit smaller. We talked about, that's the other cool thing. Okay, we talked about like lower whips for like bottlenecks and kind of using those to help with swarming. The other thing is just creating that visibility over the stuff. Like I wouldn't say I'm ever going to be the biggest fan of Jira, but one thing is nice is that you can create these little kind of visible markers over like how long something's been in a particular column for.
Yep.
So if you've got a sense of like, okay, well, the max something should be in progress is like 3 days, you can start having a look at that and maybe actually having open conversations that you stand up to go, look, hey, like we said this was our goal. This is currently like 3 or 4 days in progress. Do you need a hand? Or is it under control? Or, is there stuff that we can take off your plate so that you can focus on this task and actually have like meaningful conversations about the work?
That's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Because I think there's all sorts of different reasons why this kind of thing happens in like whatever type of sync up meeting you have, but you might have, say, more junior people that perhaps they're hiding behind something and it's like, oh no, it's getting done, and it's like, well, I mean, it's not. We can see it, right? And it's not. It literally, there's a whole, unlimited other reasons why this type of thing happens, but it's visible. And now it's not a matter of like, no one's there to make you feel bad about it. It's not a personal thing. It's literally, this is what we were talking about in terms of timing. It's not there. And like, hey, like we're a team. Like, what do we do? Right? Like, it's, do you need help? Maybe this person was, they were sick for 2 days and they only got just started on it in the first day. And it's like, okay, like that's very explainable. No one's chasing you down to punish you. It's just like, we're a team. How do we make this kind of go in the direction that we said it's going to go in?
Yeah.
What do we do?
100%. Yeah. And I think you've covered off quite well there that like some folks might be like a little bit like sort of like fearful of like that being like some kind of accountability sort of sledgehammer aimed at them. But that's not, again, like that's not the intention so much as going, look, hey, like we said it was this, maybe we were wrong. Maybe, like you said, maybe you might need more support. Maybe whatever the case might be, is that like this system works best when we're able to kind of move those cards from like, to do all the way to like done as smoothly as possible. And if there's stuff that we need to fix so that like that happens more smoothly, or if there's more support that we need to give that we're not giving, like those are really valuable feedback points for the team. And you shouldn't really have to wait till retro to get them, right? You should be able to kind of action those as they're coming up and continue to kind of create that environment where like, yeah, okay, cool. We dropped the ball here. We need to pick it up. Let's figure out how to do it as a team and like actually focus on that. Or, okay,
and
cool.
The word you used was we, right? Like, it's not you dropped the ball. It's we.
Like, even at the start of this conversation, if you have a look at like me going, our team was behind the 8 ball in the estimation, like that's my responsibility as like a delivery lead, right, at the time. So it's about that sort of like shared sense of ownership and like everyone kind of being in that to kind of see that outcome through. and like as long as you kind of got that data behind you, and this is actually a little snippet of the spreadsheet we had at the time, it's easy to start like building up that clearer picture over time of where are you spending your time. And for us, that ended up actually like illuminating that there were some areas where we had external dependencies that were costing us more time than we wanted. And we're able to actually sort of send engineers over into other teams for secondments to improve that experience, to help further reduce our cycle times anyway. But yeah, ultimately in a nutshell, like we were able to use this to really kind of forecast our delivery using that cycle time, and we'd see like in that same sort of spreadsheet that cycle time go down. And I found out recently a colleague of mine has actually found a much better way at kind of like fishing this data out of Jira and using some like AI tools to kind of actually generate a lot of this automated reporting.
Oh, nice.
Which I'm really curious about, because even though I'm a staff engineer, I still want to try and see a bit more of that data. And it really did make a big difference for us over time in terms of our predictability. And like I said, it gets to the point where, we were able to kind of like shift that conversation away from like dates and deadlines, because ultimately, it's like when like the train's coming like every 5 minutes, you don't care about what the schedule is. You just know that you're able to get a train in 5 minutes. And that's kind of where we're at, which was really nice.
It's such a good analogy that slightly unrelated, but to the same thought process. We had one of the teams that I managed. We were the sort of the first to get to a point where, like any commit we pushed up and we had a build come out of it, we were like, literally, you can take that and ship it if you want. And like that was the goal of the other teams, but like I shouldn't say never. It wasn't really at that point. And when we would have like our one team had a smaller piece that would get released standalone, but also would get released bundled. Kind of hard to explain, but it could get packaged into a larger suite of products. If they had to cut like a hot fix or something, they would be going, okay, like, what do you guys have to do to get your stuff ready? We're like, just take whatever's there. Just take whatever's there. And it was like we had to coach people to let them know, like, hey, like if you even want us to add one more feature and you want to ship it, like, it's fine. Like we literally, if it gets committed, we have full confidence. They're like, well, how much time do you need to go test it? We're like, if it's in, we have full confidence.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, I'm gonna cut the slides off there, but like that to your point, right? Like that's that sort of like ending up confidence bit. It was just where we ended up, where we were like quite confident whatever we were kind of like pushing out. We'd gone from like say 2 releases in 12 months to like in a very short space of time, like 10 in just as many months. And part of that was just from treating that work as a queue and from like optimizing everything around like, let's make movement through this queue as smooth as possible, and let's really optimize for those flow metrics. We were able to really kind of like turn around and do that. But the last point you said that, where you like your team was already in that position with like, hey, the commit's there. We're at the point where it doesn't matter. Like as long as our commit's there, it's all good. It's such a gratifying feeling as a team to know that like it's just, it takes all the stress out of the equation. Like you just feel like you're hitting a winner every time you step up to bat.
So like you
crazy.
have, you get to that point with your, continuous integration systems. The parts you were talking about were, even imagining going through your sprint commitments and stuff. And like, again, if you're able to get your work structured in a way where if someone was like, hey, look, like we're halfway through the sprint, like, are we able to take what's here like halfway through? And if you're like, yeah, like you're not going to get the stuff that's not done, obviously, but we've already been able to land things in the sprint. Like that's pretty cool, right? Like getting to this point, back to what you were saying, and I don't have the exact quote, but basically having like the smaller pieces, right? Like when you can break things down smaller, you can land them faster, you can understand them better, you can reason about smaller things better. A lot of awesome things happen. So I think it's a good takeaway.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I wanted to say thanks so much for chatting through this with me. If folks wanted to get in touch with you, where are the best places to reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been an awesome chat. You can typically find me on LinkedIn these days. You'll see me on Tom Ridge on LinkedIn. The other place you can find me, I do have like a Substack. I post in both places somewhat haphazardly at the moment, but I should be getting back to it shortly. So, and particularly if you're interested in Elixir stuff, I will be writing a fair bit more about that shortly.
Cool, awesome. And I'll make sure I'll get links and stuff from you after, and I'll have them in the description and all that, so I won't mess it up. But yeah, Tom, thanks again. I think for me, this is like a super good reflection of a bunch of things that I have touched on in my past life, and it was really cool to see how you were able to bring these things together and have like what really feels like an awesome success story of taking something where you're like, we're not doing a great job to like, hell yeah, we're crushing it. And I'm sure that feels amazing.
Thank you, and thanks for the feedback, and thanks for the chat. And for my part, minor apologies about the having to skip through a few slides and animations towards the end.
No worries.
Cool.
Awesome stuff. Okay, thanks again, Tom.
No worries. Thanks so much, Nick. Take care. See ya.